Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another year of Dine and Learn through the summer. I want to thank Mike Holzer for arranging everything. Thank the Newhouse family for sponsoring tonight's feast. Apologize, I'm a little under the weather, but I'll try to speak up. So I thought this year, because we're Daf Yomi is learning Nedarim, we might focus on a little of practical Hilchos Nedarim, because if you learn the Masechta is very lumdish. A lot of the brisker terminology comes from Nedarim, as we'll see in a few minutes, Mir Hashem. So it's a little theoretical, and even the practical examples in the Gemara don't seem necessarily too practical to us. So I thought I'd bring it down to our own lives. And there are a lot of shilas that actually come up in our own life. And Mir Hashem, next week maybe we'll have a shir on Hilchos Bli Neder. But tonight we'll start with the Nedarim, and I'll keep to the time limit. So just a brief outline. There's such a thing as a neder and such a thing as a shvua. The Torah wants us, Hashem wants us to keep our words. We say we're going to do something, we say something, we're supposed to keep to it. The difference between a neder and a shvua is, generally speaking, a neder is on an object. If I say, I'm not going to get any benefit from this object, so the neder is on the object. The shvua is on the person. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. In the Gemara's terminology, the only place in Shas is a gavra and a chefsa. Shvua is a gavra. Neder is on a chefsa. A shvua is stricter than a neder in some ways, because the Torah says lo yinakeh, if you don't keep your shvuas, so we're even stricter that you should keep your shvuas. Most of what we say nowadays is a shvua. But for example, if you donate money to a shul or a yeshiva, so that is considered at least in some degree a neder, and that has important ramifications, which Mir Hashem we'll try to cover this summer. So the text I handed out and that we're using is the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, like we do through the Friday night shir in the winter. And I have in front of me Shlomo Aviner's commentary in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, where he brings a lot of practical shilas. Almost everything I say is just directly from him. So first of all, let's talk about, is a neder good or bad? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Right? The Torah says if you say something, you should keep your word. But does the Torah does Hashem want us to start taking Nedarim and Shvuos or not? So the Gemara, comes up a few times in the Gemara in Nedarim. The Gemara at the beginning of Chulin quotes Pasuk in Koheles, Tov asher lo tidor, it's better not to take a neder, misha tidor v'lo tishalim, than to take a neder and not fulfill it. Right? It's better not to take a neder. That's pretty obvious. But then that's the question, okay, fine, so if I'm not going to keep it, I shouldn't say it. But should I say it in the first place if I know I'm going to keep it? What about the good person, the tzaddik? Should he take a neder or not? So machlokes tanoim. I think Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. One says good to take a neder if you're going to go to follow through, and the other says no, don't take a neder. Don't put yourself in that situation. It's risky. It's also it's the machlokes. That starts with the Tanai. Move on, generation after generation. It's machlokes all the way through. So what's the conclusion? So the conclusion of Shulchan Aruch is a compromise, somewhere in between. Some Nedarim and Shvuos are good. Generally speaking, they're bad. So as we read through, first it's going to start out really bad, then it's going to get to the words appropriate. So the first, if in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Siman Samach Zayin, Al Tehi Ragil Ben Nedarim. Don't be get used to making Nedarim. Don't do it casually or frequently. Kol Hanod, just as a point, this edition of Kitzur Shulchan Aruch that I have photocopied for you, it has the commentary of Rav Mordechai Eliyahu on the bottom, former chief Sephardic rabbi of Eretz Yisrael. So Al Tehi Ragil Ben Nedarim, Kol Hanoder Ki Ilu Bone Bama B'Shas Isser Habamos. Anyone who takes a neder, that's not the Kitzur's language, it precedes him, it's from the Gemara. Anyone who takes a neder, it's as if he builds an altar at the times when it's usher to have an altar, right before Matan Torah was allowed. After we built the Mishkan, it was not allowed. And someone who keeps his neder, right? Someone who actually follows through and does what he says, and does not violate the Isser Deraisa of not keeping a neder. Kilu hikriv alav korban. It's as if you brought a forbidden sacrifice on this altar, which is not allowed. Shechayiv mishum shchutei chutz. You're chayiv. You're chayiv min Torah. You violated a biblical prohibition that you brought shchutei chutz, a korban outside of the Beis Hamikdash, in the Mishkan. Ki tov yoser sheyishalom lidrov yatirulo. General rule, says the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. If you make a neder, go to a Beis Din and have it undone. Yishal, you can have your neder undone, and that's what he recommends doing. If you accidentally or intentionally take a neder, go to a Beis Din, and they will try to find a reason to undo it. We'll Mr. Hashem get to that in a few weeks. However, he says that's general nedarim. Aval nidre hekdesh mitzvah lekaiman. But if you make a neder to give money to the yeshiva, to the shul, it's easy to be cynical here. Rabbi saying if you give money to, but it's a mitzvah. If you make a neder of a mitzvah to give money to some sort of a tzedakah, to poor people, so then it's a mitzvah. You should go through with it. You should not have a bezdin undo the neder. Shenemar nederai laShem ashalem. Right? If you make any neder to Hashem, meaning to any general mitzvah, you should go through with it, follow through. You should only undo the neder b'shas adchak. So before we get to an example of shas adchak and what you do, I don't forget it. Okay, let's say it happens, especially in the past few years. The way if I'm not a big giver, I don't give $1 million to tzedakah, but people who do. It sounds like a big term. You give $10 million to Yeshiva University, but really, what he does is he agrees to give $1 million for 10 years. I'm not belittling that in any way. However, someday I should have $1 million to give away. So what happens if this guy says he's going to give $1 million away, and to, let's say, Yeshiva University in such a form that it's a real tzedakah, it's a hekdesh, and then the stock market collapses and he doesn't have his money. Taka happened. Yeshiva University started its fundraising in 1929, and then the stock market collapsed, and they had some problems finishing, getting the money for the building. Baruch Hashem, they did. So let's say that happens. So what do you do then? Can you bishol al your neder? So if you have the money, then no, you shouldn't. But if you don't have the money, it happens. It happens. I think we've seen it in the shul right over the past however many years. It's happened. People promise a lot of money, and then. Their investments, so their business doesn't do as well as they expected. So it's a machlokas, but I think generally speaking, the Shach says you're allowed to have a bezdin undo that neder. However, the Shach quotes the tshuva of the Maharamin saying you're not scot-free. Give what you can, and maybe the bezdin should take a look at your books and see what you're able to give. They shouldn't just say, okay, you promised $1 million, you give zero. They should take a look and see, well, what you can't afford $100,000, so that's what you should give, and they'll be matir. On condition that you give $100,000. So that's how we should have such problems. So let's talk about a neder that shvua that we all face at one time or another. As United States citizens and residents of New York City, we have to do jury duty. Now, I've been on jury duty. I've never actually been picked. I've never had to testify in a trial. But either way, you have to swear that you will tell the truth. I've never seen them hold a Bible. Hold on, Mush. Just hold on. Take a minute. So I think you know what? Go ahead, Mush. Say what you're going to say.
What you were going to say that I was going to say was now you can affirm instead of swear.
So that's the question. Does affirming actually accomplish anything? You're 100% right. You're a step ahead of me. So you can affirm rather than swear. And in Eretz Yisrael, anyone who's drafted into the army, they have after basic training, they have a whole, what they call standing in ceremony, standing up, stepping in.
It's in Masada.
Right, in Masada or at the Kosel. They have two different versions of it, and sometimes you see on YouTube they have the From soldiers, they sing Animamin, it's very moving, they give everyone a Koran Tanakh, even the secular Israelis get a Koran Tanakh, it's very moving, very inspiring, and they all have to swear to fulfill their duties as soldiers. So for the From soldiers, there's a special exemption, they're allowed to be matzir, they're allowed to affirm that they'll keep it. But the question is, does that really work? Because in Nedarim, there's a concept of kinuye nedarim. A kinui, you don't have to use the word neder, you don't have to use the word shvua. If you use any word that implies a swear, a promise, a commitment, that's a neder, that's a shvua. So the fact that we say I affirm is a kinui. That's a shvua. So how does that help us at all?
Just one thing though. When we said Chol Nidre every year at the point of Yom Kippur, we're wiping this out anyway.
Harry, excellent point. Kol Nidre is a form of Hataras Nedarim, or it's I forget the term. You're saying in advance that you are. There's a term for it. I just I have a mind blank right here. But if you look at footnote Bays on this, so this is Rav Mordechai Eliyah was saying.
Is it in advance or it's after the fact?
So that's not Machlokas Rishonim. That's why there's a Rabbeinu Tam suggested changing the language of Kol Nidre, and certain shuls they do it. When I say it along with the Chazan, I actually add extra wording that Rabbeinu Tam says that
is that anything that you will make?
it's right Yom Kippur Shir Avar Ad Yom Kippur Zeh, and some people add Yom Kippur Zeh Ad Yom Kippur Haba.
Right, there's some parentheses in the art scroll.
Oh, the art scroll is for they know what they're doing. The art scroll, so they add it in. That's the Rabbeinu Tam's edition. Some people say it, some people don't, because the question whether you're undoing the previous Nidarim, right? And listen to the language of Kol Nidre, Vesare, Vecharim, every kinui possible. You're undoing it, or you're saying up front that anything that I will say in advance doesn't work. So the footnote says, Afa Pishosim Tnai Erev Yom Kippur, even though you make a condition on Erev Yom Kippur, meaning Kol Nidre, that the Nidarim Yeshua is going to apply. Yesh Sarach Lishol Sheilas Chacham Al Kol Nidre. No, it doesn't. You still have to go to Besdin to undo your Nidarim. Why? Kevin Shehatara Sheosin Erev Kippur, because that Hatara that they do, he al neder lo yadua. It's only on Nidarim that you don't know about. If you do know about it, it doesn't work. Kadesh lo yanish. Sorry?
How can you do a neder that you don't know that you did? You don't remember.
Actually, it's actually very easy. Because if you promise, sometimes you don't even realize what we say. That's how bad we are.
But the promise is, when you say a word promise, is it literally taken as the same commitment as a neder? I mean, in the English language.
It depends. It depends because it follows the normal. It takes a chacham to figure this out. It's not simple because it depends what do people normally mean. Nedarim go after lashon bnei adam, the way people normally speak. So sometimes it depends which people are you. So depending on where you are and where you're coming from, some people just promise and swear, and they'll swear on their mother's grave, and they don't mean it. And nobody means in that situation. Right. But if someone from my background would swear on his mother's grave, I shouldn't even say my mother's grave. My mother's still alive. But people do that.
So at the same time, if you use the word commitment, I make a commitment. Does that mean?
How's that not a neder?
Right, that's what I'm asking. I mean,
that's a shvua.
Right, exactly. That's why I want to delineate that word. Okay, fine.
I think so. So you were saying something?
No, I just mentioned that if you're intoxicated,
if you're drunk.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're. I don't think you're chayav to fulfill the dharma you make while you're drunk. I guess it depends how much you drink. We should test it out. See. So where were we? So there's another issue. Just wanted to bring it out that when you're in court, you don't swear in God's name. Normally, a neder shvua has to use Shem Hashem. However, there's a concept of yados nedarim. It's at the very beginning of the first Mishnah, I think, yados nedarim. So a yad is like a handle. A base yad is a handle. So if you hold something by the handle, you're not holding the whole instrument in your hand. You're only holding the handle. But yados nedarim, even if you just hold the handle of a neder, it's as if you do a neder. So even if you just say language that begins to sound like a neder, that's a neder. So even if you don't say Shem Hashem in the neder, as long as you use some language that's a kinui, that's still considered a neder. So if we go, when I go to jury duty, it's in the boxes with 20 to 30 people, they just have one person read out, an officer of the court read out, do you swear to da 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 da, and everybody's supposed to say yes together. They don't know what you say. You can say no. You can say bologna sandwich. They don't really care. I've never testified. I think when you testify, you do it on your own. Moshe, is that true?
Sure.
And they do care what you say, right? If you say no, they'll stop the court.
That's right.
So you can't get away with it. I've never been chosen for jury duty, so I've never been in that situation, or I've never witnessed a crime that I've been deposed for. So this is a shaila in Eretz Yisrael. The poskim in Eretz Yisrael generally say, and I asked the shaila before I knew what was going on in Eretz Yisrael. The first time I had jury duty in New York, so I asked the Rav. At the time I was dominating the Lakewood Minion of Flatbush. The Rav there is Mordechai Marcus. He's an Adam Gadol. So I asked him, what do I do if I affirm that's a shvua? And we try very hard not to take a shvua. And the reason, by the way, we try hard not to take a shvua is not because we're tricky people. It's because when you take a neder or a shvua, you have to fulfill it 100%. Now, let's say you're a soldier in the army. So if you don't follow your orders exactly, so they have punishments. Depending on how bad you do, is depending on how bad the punishment. Sometimes it's do 100 push-ups. But if you take a neder or if you take a shvua and then you don't fulfill your orders, you're over on Isser Deraisa. So the army takes it less seriously than the Torah does. The Torah says that's an Isser Deraisa. So you want to avoid taking a shvua no matter what. And if you could misspeak, people sometimes misspeak, then you correct it. They can amend the record, they can amend the transcript. But but it's too late. You're already over in Issa Deraisa. So we want to avoid taking the Shvuah so you don't violate this biblical prohibition. So I asked Mordechai Marcus, and he said, no, from the fact, and this is what the Poskim in Eretz Yisrael say also, if everybody in the city had to affirm that they would tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, then a taka would be a Shvuah. But because it's a language of swear, and they say, you know what, you don't want to swear, you can affirm, they're revealing their intention. It's a Gilui Das, that they don't consider it a Shvuah, and we don't consider it a Shvuah. And therefore, when we say, I affirm, we are saying, I affirm and I don't swear. That's effectively what you're saying, and therefore it's not a Shvuah. And also when you're in Eretz Yisrael, if you're a soldier, when you say, Ani Matzir, you're saying, Ani Matzir velo mashpia. I am affirming and I'm not swearing, and therefore it doesn't have the deraisa status of a Shvuah. Let's just go a little further. So Sif Beis. Right? We said a Shvuah is stricter than a neder, and here's how it comes up in practice. Avolim avar v'nishba, but if you mistakenly you took a Shvuah, al eze davar on anything, so we said if you take a neder, you should go to Beis Din and they'll undo it. If you take a Shvuah, lo yishal alav, you shouldn't undo it, ela yamo b'shvuaso. You have to keep it. You said you're going to do it, you took a Shvuah, so you have to keep it, af al pi shehu mitzvah, even if it's painful for you, you should still keep your word. Shenemar nishba lahara velo yamir. Right? You took a Shvuah even if it's bad for you, and you still won't violate that. And if you do that, if you fulfill your Shvuahs, it'll stay with you forever. It's a good thing. Only in a shasad chak, only in a very difficult situation, do you undo a Shvuah. So the Kitzur doesn't really go into it, but the Shach has something very interesting and strange. He says if you take a neder or a Shvuah that you won't that you will fulfill a mitzvah, so that Shvuah is null and void. Why? Because we're Omed v'nishba mehar Sinai. We took a Shvuah on Har Sinai, we'll keep the mitzvahs, and therefore no other Shvuah can be chal on that, can go on that. So Rabbi Kiva Eger says, what are you talking about? That doesn't make no sense. Rabbi Kiva Eger says, no, the whole point, when the Gemara says that, is we took a Shvuah to keep the Torah at Har Sinai. So if nowadays I would take a Shvuah that I won't keep the Torah, so it's too late. I can't have a Shvuah against my already Shvuah. The original Shvuah has precedence. But to take a Shvuah on top of the Shvuah that I will keep it, so there's no Gemara that says you can't do that. It's so shver on the Shach, I don't even know what the Shach means. You can't even say it's a shver Shach, because it's so obviously wrong. He couldn't have meant what we think he means. I don't know what he means.
Well, I think just it's a Shvuah Shach, because you're only on
It's what they call ziras. It's to get you more excited about it.
If you're not really accomplished with anything.
You're adding another Isser. We have that. It's the Gemara that says, add another Isser to it. So it's common to take a Shavua, not common, people take a Shavua. So if they're having trouble, okay, so let me give you an example. This was something that I sat on a Beis Din for this Shavua. In Yeshiva, we're a bunch of Bachrim. Over the summer, we rented an apartment near the Yeshiva because the dorms were closed, and we were learning in the Yeshiva's base medrash. So you get a bunch of Bachrim in an apartment. So we weren't necessarily the cleanliest of people. And what we did is on a Sunday, someone would buy the Sunday paper, right? In those days, papers were Genut Kazach. And every day, someone would take a section, and we'd use it as a placemat, and then we write on it Milchik Fleishik, and that's what we'd use through the week for our placemats. That's what Bachrim do. So one of the boys set up he had to take a shvuah. He had to be matin a shvuah because he had taken a shvuah that he wouldn't read a newspaper. This was a YU, by the way. This happens because he thought it was bittul Torah. He wanted to focus more on his learning and not sit and read the newspaper half an hour. So he took a shvuah. He wouldn't read a newspaper. And now, what's he supposed to do? It's a placemat. It's almost impossible not to read at least a sentence from the newspaper. So Rav Shlomo Aviner was asked this question: can you be matir? You take a shvuah, you're not going to read the newspaper. Can you matir that shvuah? So I didn't know what Rav Aviner said at the time, 25 or so years ago, and so we were matir the shvuah. Rav Shlomo Aviner says not to. Why not? Because he says in newspapers, even fine newspapers like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, so to speak, fine newspapers, they have pictures that are inappropriate. So you're actually taking a shvuah to strengthen the isser of looking at those inappropriate pictures, and we should not be matir a shvuah to do a mitzvah or to stay away from Avera. So I guess to be Melamed Chus on myself, 25 or so years ago, he was only looking at the front page. And the front page doesn't have these pictures, generally speaking. It's just condensed news, and then you turn the page and you have to see the ads. So as long as he's not turning the pages, he was okay. So maybe that's a limit chutz on us. It's actually interesting because for this very reason, it's better to read the newspaper online because you can have your browser with an add-in eliminate all images, and then you don't have these problems. It's even better to read it in whatever from newspaper you prefer, but you don't necessarily get all the most robust news and opinions from political and economic financial subjects in necessarily Yater or Hamadiyah. So that's what I do. I set my browsers, no ads, no images. It brings up a shiloh, which I don't think we have time to. Is it mutter to use an ad blocker? Maybe it's totally irrelevant. I'll briefly outline the problem and my suggestion as follows. Some websites are now finding that over 50% of the visitors block all the ads. And this is causing them problems because they have costs generated by people using their bandwidth. And they're not showing their ads as much as they expected, so they're not getting as much ad revenue. And it threatens an entire industry that can no longer fund itself through the ads. So I think one of the from websites, Chadrei Charedim in Eretz Yisrael, they actually have, if you're using an ad blocker, a window pops up saying, you're violating our terms and conditions, you have to remove your ad blocker. So the question is, are you allowed to use an ad blocker on a website, or are you violating the desires of the owners? So I was thinking about it. I don't have time to go through the whole thing. Lafini is IT for what it's worth. I think if they make an explicit term and condition that you're not allowed to use an ad blocker, so then you're downloading their material against their terms and conditions, I think that's wrong, and you're not allowed to. That's probably gezel. But if they don't have that explicit term and condition, so then you're not violating anything like that, their copyright or anything like that. So I think L'chara should be mutter. So I just don't go to Chadrei Charedim anymore. That's not like I usually did in the past. But if you ever get that window, say don't use an ad blocker, because I think it's more important to use an ad blocker than it is to go to any of these websites. Find another website. That's at least my philosophy. So, Mr. Shem, in the coming weeks we'll discuss more on Hilchos Nedarim.